I was never awesome at math. It was a good subject of mine, but I'm going to brag a little bit. I got 2 C's in high school. One was in algebra. So Mr. Lillison was the teacher. He put up with a lot from me. So, but how does the 50s add up to the 20s? Well, thanks to ChatGPT, I did some looking at the history of leadership. I've always thought, and I've said when I do my speaking and workshops, I'm out and about, that leadership really hasn't changed. It's just the way that it's packaged and presented. The challenges that leaders had in the 1950s are no different than the challenges in the 2020s and maybe in the future. Now, there are some subtle changes. I won't say it's been exactly the same, but I think that the way in which we teach and the things that we express, the people that we use, we're using some content over and over a little bit, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think there's a lot of great new ideas. I mean, we heard about, maybe a decade ago, emotional intelligence was a new hot thing. And it is hot, but it's not a new thing. And it's really, everything but our cognitive intelligence, everything but our thinking and how we develop as a leader. So I thought, well, I'm going to try to prove my point. So I created a presentation about kind of the history of leadership through the help of ChatGPT. So let's take a look at it. How the 50s add up to the 20s. And again, I got some help from ChatGPT. And if you don't use ChatGPT, I would suggest using it. It's a great tool. It takes all the research you want to do on some other, on a Google or some other platform and does it specifically for your task. And it's awesome. It's awesome. It's not cheating. It's just utilizing what's out there, as long as you give credit. And ChatGPT didn't list any resources for this, so I have to give ChatGPT the credit for this. So let's take a look at this. First, let's look at the 1950s. And I'm going to present 5 basic leadership aspects, top leadership conversations, things that were important as it relates to leadership in each decade. So as you look at these, in the 50s, hierarchical authority was definitely critical, and it was emphasized. Management. It was talking about management, not leadership. That's definitely a difference in the 50s, but we've come a long way since then to try to overcome that, hopefully. But there are still leaders who are focused on the hierarchical aspect. Loyalty and commitment important. Leading by example, being a role model. And we hear that all the time. That's nothing new in our day, and it was not new back in the 1950s. Efficiency and productivity. Again, a real strong manufacturing tilt to our country and really the world at that time, but we still look to be efficient and productive. And embracing technological innovation. We'll see that in just about every decade in these lists, right? And somebody back in that time frame wrote a book called Emotions of Normal People, and it was done by William Marsten. So interesting title. Let's see what that means for the presentation. So in the 1960s, adapting to a changing workforce. Well, we're adapting to a changing workforce now. We've got 5 generations in the workplace. Generational diversity is a challenge, as are all other forms of it. Focus on human relations. So getting away from the hierarchical approach, but we're focusing a lot on human relations now. We have human relations managers, HR managers, right? Here's innovation, creativity, another aspect of leadership. Decentralized decision making. Again, that's an effort that started back in the 50s and 60s, still going on today, but I think we made some improvement, but certainly not a new concept. And ethical leadership. Throughout history, we've seen challenges with ethical leadership. 20, 30 years ago, it was Enron. We've had other ethical issues. We've had ethical issues back in the 50s and 60s. One tool I like to talk about, just as an aside, is the DISC assessment tool. It's a great tool for looking at individuals' leadership skills. It's about a 15-minute assessment. You get a 30-page report, and I can walk you and your team through the value of it and actually end up with a development plan, a personal development plan, professional development plan, excuse me, for you and your team if you decide to do that. Now let's look at the 70s. Well, again, we'll see some similarities. Organizational change, flexibility, so a little bit less hierarchical. Employee empowerment was becoming a term in the 1970s. Systems thinking, again, beginning to become more prominent, but not a huge change. Global awareness started coming more into play. We're a global community, so that's a good thing, still here today. And a collaborative leadership style. I love the word collaborative. I think very often we cooperate, but that's just, shaking hands, nodding your heads, and smiling at each other. Collaborate is when we actually do things together to change, and a collaborative leadership style is important for that. Let's look at what the 80s bring. Building a stronger corporate culture. So here's the first time we hear about company culture. As you know, I'm on a mission to revolutionize company culture and leadership. And here's where it begins to pop up way back in the 1980s. Strategic management, long-term vision, more looking ahead, more planning. Here's technology innovation. Again, that's going to be with us forever. Here we hear about customer-centric leadership, focusing on the customer. Now, I think that's good, but you're going to have great relationships with your customers if you have great relationships with your employees. And the fifth one is a results-oriented mindset. Again, productivity, efficiency, a lot of the things we've heard about are coming through also in the 19. Oh my gosh, it's my commercial. You've seen these before, but if you haven't got the book, the ebook, get it. Or this is the first time you watched the video, get it. It's great for new managers. It's great for frontline. It's great for CEOs, presidents, whatever the case might be. So you go to toddkukan.com/guide, toddkukan.com/guide, or of course you can use this QR code. But if you're on your phone, it's kind of hard to do that. All right, let's get back to the shoe. All right, the 1990s, I want to be looking at globalization again, technology and the internet, innovation, agility, talent management, different term for what we've heard about before, collaborative leadership, team-oriented leadership. Again, we're hearing some redundancy now, a lot more duplication. So how much has leadership changed? One other little trick that I have access to is something called the leadership experience. It's a game with cards and dice and that you play with your team. And it's not a game in the sense of, electronic game or something like that. It's a game in the sense of engaging leaders in conversations about important things in their work life and their professional life. It's a great kind of warm-up tool to doing more leadership. You might do the leadership experience first, followed by the DISC assessment. Enough advertisements. 2000s, digital again. Emotional intelligence, here's that term that came up about 20 years ago. Ethical and transparent leadership, more authenticity in the workplace, innovation, and the global aspect again. So ChatGPT is sharing some redundancies as we look at each decade here. Purpose and values now are becoming more prevalent. I think core values is a critical element. If you don't know your core values, you should be doing my exercise that talks about core values and how we get to that point. But it really talks about who we are. And the Gen Z generation is very much about purpose and values. Data and analytics are becoming more prevalent. Tough to do sometimes in leadership, tough to analyze feelings and emotions and leadership skills and abilities. DEI is now becoming a stronger and more prevalent in our organizations and our workplace. Agile leadership, flexibility, and then we get into work-life balance. So now we're seeing a lot more emphasis on culture than maybe we have in the past. Also, another last commercial, 360 Leadership Academy. It's an online academy where we go through a lot of the things like core values. So, take a look at it, see if you might be interested in that. Adapter, hybrid, and remote work models. Lead with empathy and compassion. A lot more related to the emotional intelligence aspect. Agility again. We see transformation and innovation. And finally, the DEI coming up again. So what does the future look like? What is ChatGPT saying is out there for us? Well, cultivating adaptive leadership. Yeah, we're going to have to be able to adapt. We did that in the 2020 when we had the epidemic. We're going to have to adapt again. We're going to have other crises, so we're going to have to absolutely adapt with culture. Cultivate adaptive leadership. Focus on sustainability. Ethical leadership will certainly continue to be important. Now we've got the human and AI collaboration to think more about. Obviously, it's exploded in the last 4 or 5 years as we get into the later 20s. Radical inclusivity, not just DEI, but inclusivity, and really focusing on ways we can bring people together in the workplace. And finally, lifelong learning and innovation. That's something that's been part of us for a long time. So I think you see that really there hasn't been a lot of change. There's been some things here and there that have changed, but really leadership is boring in some ways, right? And you can see how the 50s add up to the 20s because we brought forward a lot of these things we've talked about. So hopefully this has been helpful for you to kind of see about that approach. And I'd love to have the chance to work with you. I'd love for you to get my complimentary ebook, the Todd at toddkukan.com. And other than that, have a great day.